So as long as it's fair, as long as it's voluntary, inequality is fine. Inequality is great. We want those who succeed to be more rewarded than those who destroy value. But in the sense of our current environment, we have really sinister inequality.
If everybody, if the water's flowing and everyone is benefiting, right, everyone's cup is filled, people are happy, right? They have better things to do than to line up outside of someone's house and threaten to chop their head off.
I don't think we should be setting up guillotines anywhere, and that's why I love Bitcoin. It's the peaceful revolution, right? But why do people want to set up these guillotines? Because they know the system isn't working.
It started to make a lot of sense to me that if we fixed money, we fixed so many problems in society. And so as a technology person, I was like, what should I be working on that's more important than this? There's nothing more important than this.
Hello and welcome to Tucson Bitcoin Podcast. Today I have on Isaiah Jackson, the author of Bitcoin and Black America. In this conversation, we talk about a wide variety of topics. We touched a lot on race and the racist history of banking and monetary policy in the U.S. And he presented some really interesting solutions to it and using Bitcoin, and it was a really fun conversation. I learned a lot from him, and I read his book, and I highly suggest it to anybody. If you don't know about the history of racism in the banking sector, this is a really, really good place to start. So yeah. And we're recording. Welcome, Isaiah, to the Tucson Bitcoin Podcast. So for anybody that doesn't know who Isaiah is, you have to go and get the book, Bitcoin and Black America. And he's also the host of the Gentleman Crypto podcast. So that's another good place to check his work out. But yeah, what inspired you to write this book?
Being in the Bitcoin space, one of the biggest things I saw was lack of diversity, and in my community, I feel like we really need Bitcoin. So I wanted to write the book just to sort of put a signal out there that Bitcoin is for everybody. And if we're going to have mass adoption at some point, the Black community has to be involved. And I would love to see everyone who wants to see a difference in the economic system get into Bitcoin. But this is just my contribution to my community.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's been well received from what I've seen so far. What have been the reactions to the book?
Pretty much positive. I was kind of bracing myself for the negative reactions. May have overstated it, but pretty positive. I think on the Bitcoin side, Bitcoin people like it because it does have the information to get started. Then for novices, no coiners, people who aren't in this space, it's great because it's easy to digest. And it also gives solutions that pretty much anybody can use. However, it does narrow in on the Black community specifically, but you can mirror that across different groups. So it's been received pretty good, and the feedback has been great. That's why I'm glad the second book is coming out, because it's even more information.
Yeah. So what is the second book gonna be about?
Oh yeah. So Bitcoin and Black America, the second edition, is 7 new chapters. Even more blockchain professionals write about more countries, because as a Black American, a lot of my friends and even family members are abroad. So writing about countries that are predominantly Black, because Bitcoin can be used globally, that's a great thing. And then with some of the events in 2020, I wanted to hit home on how Bitcoin can be used for the future. Bitcoin as opposed to asking for reparations. Talking about Bitcoin and legacy with marriage and kids, a whole lot of subjects I didn't touch in the first edition, sort of a step up.
Awesome. Yeah, it's with the instability of money in Africa, specifically, Bitcoin definitely has a huge potential to grow there and really bring a lot of people out of poverty in some pretty phenomenal ways. Like, I mean, the classic example that I hear a lot of hyperinflation and bad management of government is Zimbabwe, and for that to have a stable currency would be a game changer. Um,
Mhm.
one of the, I mean, the chapter that I found most striking, and I've heard you talk about it being one of the better received chapters, was the Buck the Fangs chapter.
Yeah, yeah.
So one of the things that I find really interesting, as I've done a lot more research on history of like racism in America, is there's a really strong movement of people that argue that institutional racism isn't real. Why do you think there's so many people that are arguing that?
Um, Miseducation and the suppression of information from the sources that they need to find. I think when people think institutional racism doesn't exist in the economic field, I think that's laughable simply because we have the proof. We have plenty of data describing otherwise. And, one example I like to use is, have you seen the show Watchmen
Mhm.
that came on? So Watchmen, the opening scene, first show, it showed Black Wall Street in Tulsa, and it showed it being burned down by white people back then. And there were a lot of people online that were saying, "Why would you show that scene? Because that's not real. That's just going to strike up fear." And then people were like, "That actually happened," and that to me just blew my mind because I was like, I've known that for years, and there are millions of people who were arguing against that opening scene because they thought it was race baiting or trying to get something going. It's like, no, that actually happened. And economically, that was just one example of a flourishing Black community. There were dozens around the U.S. I write about almost all of them in the new book, and they were burned to the ground. They were brick and mortar businesses, jealousy, whatever. It was taken away. But the reason I write about Bitcoin is because you can't burn down Bitcoin. So I think institutional racism exists. However, the root of it is the Federal Reserve, and the spark of what creates that diversion between classes, between races, is the fact that our money is broken and everybody is basically just scrounging to get what they can. They'll find an excuse to get it, whatever they can, but when the money is free and everybody's open, that excuse is gone, and we can have a more open society.
Yeah. For people that are kind of unaware of issues of racism in our country, what are some good resources for that? I point people a lot of times to the book, The New Jim Crow. That's one of my
Mhm.
favorites, and then your book as well. But yeah, what are some good resources that you'd point people to?
I would say Powernomics is one of the best books out by Dr. Claude Anderson. That describes sort of the power dynamics in Black economics and seeing how institutional racism existed. I would even say so far to go into Basic Economics by Thomas Sowell. It doesn't necessarily hit on the racism part per se, but when you see the disparity between numbers, you can say, "Hey, this is this is a real thing," and this is a famous economist, Black economist who is writing about this and doesn't choose sides. He just writes the facts. So I think those are two great resources to learn more.
Yeah, awesome. So going back to the Federal Reserve, that's an issue I talk about quite a bit on the podcast. What do they do that leads to inequality and racism?
So the inflation-based economy that we have now was created by the Federal Reserve in 1913, which it was formed by a group of very wealthy people who wanted to ensure their survival and their wealthiness over time. Just for kickers, they happened to be white and they did not really care about any Black plight at the time. You got to think this was 1913,
Yeah.
very different time period, very different mindset. So it wasn't even a thought. So when I tell people a lot of the racism that's in the industry now was from before, it was simply because it was built to keep poor people down, and that's where Black people were at that time. And then the racism, of course, came along with it, with the infighting. So the Federal Reserve started there, and over the years, our dollar has decreased over 99%. And because of that, somebody said a great quote is, when the U.S. has a cold, the Black community has a flu. And basically what that means is when something's going bad with us, aka our money, the Black community, it hits us even harder. So the Federal Reserve's
Hmm.
basic, their mess up in this whole situation is creating bad money and then using the media and other resources to have that infighting and racism amongst regular working everyday people. Because you can have two poor people, Black and white, arguing, and you're like, well, you're both poor because of the Federal Reserve, and then that fighting comes as a result of not having the resources. So, yeah, basically been pulling the strings behind what we see now, but that curtain's being lifted.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I think that's an issue ultimately, is that these institutions, when they're built by people that have racism and biases, it's going to filter into the policies. And so, what inevitably happens is, like, even if new people come along that don't have that same sentiment, they kind of repackage it and kind of continue the legacy of it. And yeah, the inflation, I mean, it's just been like, if you really like break down what's been done to the Black community in our country, it's pretty wild. So one of the things that I found really, really interesting about your book was you listed examples that happened in like the last 20 years of banks being found in court that they were practicing practices that were discriminatory. And it's like every single big bank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan. Yeah. All the main offenders. So I would point people that say that institutional racism isn't a thing to that. So I just want to read a quote from this that I found really good. Well, I mean, there's so many that I could pull out of this book, but here you say, I propose that we build our foundation of social change and protest by steadily moving our funds out of the banking system. The only way to hurt the banks is to disrupt their cash flow and profits. So how does Bitcoin like fit into all of this?
Yeah. So what I meant by that statement is, in order to have leverage in any business discussion, you have to have something that will take away either their power or their money, so to say. And if we're talking about they, as in the banks, moving your money into Bitcoin is the best form of peaceful protest. Taking your money out of the banking system into Bitcoin, using on-ramps that may or may not necessarily connect to banks, that to me is moving away from the system, so to say. And until we start to do that or have some sort of leverage that way, I don't think we can have any discussions that will actually change the Black community. And in a microcosm, I want people to remember, when the George Floyd events happened, how many large corporations did an about face on Black social change, and all of a sudden everything was, yeah, Black Lives Matter, yeah, Black people eat for free, whatever. It was just like, where did this come from? Because they were saving face so that they could continue making money. And I tell people, I was like, that's a sliver of what Bitcoin can do. Because imagine if, okay, instead of that being the catalyst for you to maybe change your business ways, what if the entire money system changes? Because we're saying, hey, this system has treated us wrong. We're moving towards Bitcoin. Now you have over $1 trillion worth of spending power moving out of your system. That would change a lot of minds as well. So that's basically what I meant by that. And that the Black community, out of anybody in the U.S., we really don't owe banks anything. You need no allegiance to bank. There's nothing they've done that has actually helped us long term.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Bitcoin's a pretty viable alternative. One of the things that I've been surprised about in my research is learning that a lot of Black-owned businesses operate on a cash-only basis and are actually unbanked or underbanked. Do you think that's going to be an issue for the Black community as we move away from physical cash?
At first, yes. I've already seen it starting where I've seen people in neighborhoods where I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, post office, a couple gas stations where people try to pay with cash and they're like, we don't take it. And they're just stuck. They're just like, what do you mean you don't take cash? It didn't even register to them that one day they could just say, no, we don't take cash ever. So I think in the Black community, I think that is going to be an issue at first. However, with the massive onboarding explosion we've had, where you can basically buy Bitcoin from anywhere, Bitcoin ATMs, peer-to-peer trading at different conferences, I think when we start to see Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, maybe even CBDCs get to a point where people are knowledgeable about them, the dollar itself won't seem as important. But I still think cash is king. It's still a great way to stay private. So, unfortunately, that is being taken away, but we have to adapt. And I'm trying to help push that along so we won't just be at the back learning too late like before.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. One of the things that you talk about is creating a circular economy where the money stays in your community. That's something that I'm really passionate about, because Tucson's a city that is just like wrecked by poverty. We have like a quarter of the city living under the poverty line. And it's probably only going to get worse from COVID, and the wealth disparity is going to grow with all the money printing and the job shutdowns and stuff like that. So what is a circular economy, and how do you create that and protect that?
Oh yeah. So the backbone of a circular economy is small businesses, or are small businesses. When you have small businesses that can establish themselves, making profit and hire people in that same community, what you have is sort of what I saw in LA. Living in LA, you have Chinatown, Koreatown, Little Armenia, you have Little Ethiopia. You have these brick and mortar stores where everybody supports each other. They hire each other's kids. Their kids that, or when they make money from college or from businesses, they send their kids to college to get skills to improve their business. So they become lawyers, they become business managers. All of this is part of what is called a circular economy. And with a digital currency like Bitcoin, that is possible outside of the current system we have. Because when you're using the dollar to have a circular economy, which we've seen before, that's possible. But if you start to purchase manufactured goods with Bitcoin from companies, and then you sell your goods for Bitcoin, people can spend Bitcoin, people earn it as they work, that creates sort of a circular economy. And I don't want people to think this happens overnight. This could take 10, 20 years for it to come to fruition. But it is something that if we start now, you have the mechanisms in place to make it work. You have the accounting, you know about crypto taxes, things that people are going to be catching up on in the next 5 to 10 years. I feel like people can learn it now and have that circular economy today.
Awesome. So like we're right at the beginning of what a lot of people are talking about is like a major Bitcoin bull run. And what inevitably happens during times like this is people gain interest and move into the space for the first time. How do we protect people from getting scammed?
Well, people like you and I who give out information via podcasts, via shows, educational resources, we have to step to the forefront and as a community, keep calling out scammers. I mean, Bitcoin is probably the only financial community where you see thousands of people basically say, hey, this guy's scamming, don't deal with him, blah, 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 and the community kind of pushes them out. So continuing doing that. I mean, I did a talk about scams in the space in Chicago last year around this time. And one of the things I said was, in order to stay away from scams, you have to find trusted resources. And it's kind of hard because there's no degree, certification, so to say. You kind of have to go with what people say, and do your own research is very big. But in order to stay away from that, just know the basics and follow the people that have been here through it all. Because like you said, 2017, how many people had a YouTube and crypto show? It was overnight and they were experts in 2 weeks. Same thing in 2013, the first big bull run I saw past 1,000. All of a sudden people had shows and everybody knew how to trade every asset. So it was crazy. So same thing this time around. See who's been here through it all. Like, myself, this is the third bull run I've supposedly or going to go through. So I've also been through 2 bear markets. So stick with people that are, basically here for the long haul, and you should be good. And don't send anybody Ethereum. Nobody's going to send you any back.
Yeah, I think that's a huge one. We have a lot of these larger tech platforms either knowingly or unknowingly facilitating scams. I've seen so many YouTube ads of, this send me money, I'll send you. Yeah, it's silly. I mean, it's like the Nigerian prince needs your help or whatever. It's the same exact.
Send me 1,000 and I'll send you 1 million. Yeah.
So one of the things you talked about earlier, and I kind of want to circle back to it. So there's been a lot of institutions kind of jumping on the social justice train and embracing things like Black Lives Matter. But what I kind of see that is it's a way to virtue signal without creating any real change. Um, you talk about Bitcoin being the best form of protest. Why is that a better form of protest?
So to address the first point, I agree with you there. It was so much virtue signaling. There's so many companies who really don't care anything about the Black community, but it was a good time to have that message, and here we are. The thing about peaceful protest is if you can basically move your money out of a system that we have now, from the comfort of your home, from your phone, from your laptop, and basically make a stand that I am holding this asset because I want to see a better economic future. I think that is the best form of peaceful protest that you can do. Other protests that are peaceful, such as marching, have happened for dozens of years. And over different decades, we're at maybe the third or fourth generation of marches where going into the street simply has not changed much. Now, I understand the frustration. I understand where people are coming from when they do it, but I'm a data guy. I'm all about the results, the bottom line. What have we gotten because of that? And in my opinion, nothing much has changed. The median value of Black community in America is the same since the 60s. So all of the marching in between then, all of the signs, all of the yelling, all of that has, I don't want to say done nothing. Maybe it helped your spirits. Maybe, it got you got your foot in the door, but from an economic standpoint, it has not helped at all. So if you can sit in the comfort of your home and slowly just move your savings to a better system like Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and say, hey, at some point I'm leaving the current system we're in to live in a better world, that's a better, more peaceful protest to me. You also take money out of the war machine. Most people don't understand. The more money you have in there, that's being pushed back to taxes. You're just funding the war machine, not really doing anything to help yourself with the fiat currency we have now.
Yeah, that's a big point. Jimmy Song was on the podcast last week, and he talked about that as far as like the reason why we have these forever wars and such large scale wars is that the governments have a money printer to fund all their killing, and if you take that away, they have to actually go to the people to raise money to do what they're doing, and that's very unpopular and difficult to do. So it limits their ability to do crazy stuff like go into countries that people have never heard of and bomb people with drones. Yeah, it's
unfortunately, yeah.
So when you say that a lot of things haven't changed, so we talked about racism and banking and the Fed. What other institutional issues do you see that haven't changed since the big civil rights movement in the 60s?
So I think socially, we have seen changes. Of course, there were, whites only places. There were people that went through getting beat, getting spat on, dogs not being admitted in colleges. We've seen all of this stuff before. So I think socially, yes, we have seen those changes. The problem is socially we can get along, but for some reason, whenever the economics comes up, when people start talking about money, there's a disconnect between the Black community and mainstream. Because at any point during our, 400 years being here, the only times there have been literal war and death, killing of Black Americans was when it was economic. Socially, we did have those issues, but anytime there was a financial uprising with Black Wall Street, anytime there was a change in how money was going to be used with different organizations, anytime people don't understand, Martin Luther King was killed as soon as he started talking about getting money for their problems. Similar to Medgar Evers, same thing. And when they were going for the funding to get things going for the Black community, that's when the problem started. I mean, it really system, and we have so everybody's become poor over the last few decades. However, like I said, the community has a flu, and then on top of that, you sort of see the. However, the Black is not down and out. We're not, just floundering, dying. We are pushing forward. The problem is that when you present these issues to the broader community who gets funding from, like I said, like corporations, you sort of get pushed to the side, and you're like, no, the money aspect of it, no, we're not giving you money to solve your problems, even though it's the only thing that does it. All of the virtue signaling, like you said, all of the, you know, I was in LA, so I saw in Hollywood where every single actor was like, yeah, I'm with the black community, we love everything you're doing, blah, blah, blah. And then when you say, all right, so let's affect some real change and use our money to do this, it's always a stopgap right there. So I think that's been the issue that we've seen. And I'm not a person who likes asking for much. And I think that's what a lot of our so-called black leaders have done. Been asking the government for reparations. They've been asking people for donations. They've been asking for business investment. I'm done with that. Let's take control, invest in Bitcoin, move to a system where network effect will push our value higher in the future. And then you won't walk around asking and hoping that we have something for the future.
Yeah, that's really good. It's going back to MLK. A lot of people don't realize how dark the system is and how targeted it is, and as soon as you actually try and rock the boat and create change, you get undercut. So one of the things that isn't commonly known is that the US government was found complicit in the murder of MLK in court. Like in a court, they were found complicit.
Civil, yeah.
And I think that's a really, really important thing. Okay, so like you talked a little bit about, you know, the black community has been asking the government for a very long time, and there's a lot of energy thrown at the government demanding change. When you frame things in the perspective of like, this is what our government has done, I think it changes the viewpoint of a lot of people of like, this isn't an institution that really has the best interest of everybody. It's an institution that is built, and the same thing with the banking structure. Like these are institutions which are built to protect themselves. That's, I think, one of the most powerful things about Bitcoin is it just limits the power of these institutions. And really, like I mean, we talked about inflation. If you have a money that isn't just constantly debased, if the wealth isn't sucked out of you, it's really empowering. You're able to stand on your own 2 feet to a certain extent. You have bargaining power. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like, in our system that we're living today, our political system, money is having a political voice. If you don't have money, you don't really have a voice. So like just very basic stuff. Like you look at the difference between like the justice system, for example. So like, it is just like so screwed up. Like, you know, somebody gets arrested, like a black person gets arrested for marijuana versus like a white person gets arrested for marijuana. Like there's the justice system is like so hypocritical, like one with the sentencing by the judges, and then two, like, you know, with the bail. It's really, really silly. And it's tragic, like the impacts it's had on our communities. Like, oh man,
Absolutely.
It really kind of pisses me off.
Yeah, and I'm with you there. It's not just the justice system. We've seen it in different sectors where the disparity, and this is one thing I want to say too, is that disparity between black and white communities, it hurts all of us essentially, because that's the one thing I always, you know, my friends that are white, they always agree with me there, is that there are people who are messing it up for all of us by trying to discriminate against one group. It's like, no, the justice system is messed up. The, you know, social breakdown of how people communicate, especially during political times, is all but gone. I don't even know what's going on right now. We don't have a president. I don't know what's going on in our country. But discourse has sort of broken down. You can't really have a nuanced discussion anymore. Either blue go red, or as I describe it, you either Crip or blood. Like all of a sudden everybody's in a gang and everybody's fighting each other now. It's not even there is no middle. So I'm with you there that this happen, and we need more people who can think along more lines instead of just seeing headlines and sort of making decisions that way, which I think our politicians have done for quite some time now.
Awesome. Yeah, it's yeah. So you're a person that's rocking the boat and presenting a narrative that is very disruptive. Is that something, do you ever feel fear around doing that? Or have you had any kind of like negative intimidation directed towards you?
No, not no far, and that may be the most surprising thing. I told a few friends about the book idea right when I was finishing it, and I sort of joked with them that I'm pretty sure somebody's going to come out and say and try and be funny and be like, "Well, what if I wrote Bitcoin in White America, or what if I wrote Bitcoin in something else America?" And that has happened, like on Twitter, just people tweeting, but nothing serious. And the pushback, the only pushback I've sort of gotten was from people who didn't believe in Bitcoin. They didn't really think that the solution I provided was incorrect. They just were like, "Well, I just don't know about Bitcoin because I don't understand it." And I was telling, most of the people on the book tour, people that I consult, educate, it took me 2 years to even say Bitcoin in public. I studied for a long time, saw some market cycles. So it's not like you're going to learn this overnight. And for people that need a reference point, imagine saying, "Hey, I learned about stocks. I know everything there is to know about stocks in 2 months." And it's like, you sound ludicrous. You sound crazy saying that. Bitcoin's even broader than that. So, you know what I mean? Like it's a lot to learn, and nobody's, in my opinion, a pure expert because it changes so much. So, yeah, that's one of the good things about the space as well. It changes so much. It's always exciting. But yeah, whenever you have those things in place, a lot of times, learning about stocks, learning about Bitcoin, learning about anything in general, it takes some time. Trust me, and we'll get there.
Yeah. Do you think there will be a point where there's a battle between the legacy financial system and kind of these emerging disruptive technologies?
Yes, we're getting close to it now. I believe we're maybe a step or two away. The CBDC fight is going to be interesting. I think what's going to happen is China's already introducing their CBDCs. They're going to force feed them on their citizens as a better way to spend money. However, I think it'll be initially like, hey, CBDCs versus Bitcoin, but it doesn't really have anything to do with Bitcoin. And I think at some point, Bitcoin will be a reserve currency for a country, and it'll take off from there. And CBDCs will be what people spend. Bitcoin will be what people save. And they'll work alongside each other in the future. But that initial fight, I think, will happen just confusion-wise. People getting on PayPal trying to buy Bitcoin, and they're like, "Oh, well, I got Bitcoin now." You're like, "Oh, but you can't move it off." And then people are like, "Oh, well, this is not, like, why would I have this?" So I think that time will come, but I'll be prepared, and I know others are, to try and educate others.
Yeah. Yeah. PayPal's decision and how they're facilitating Bitcoin, I don't even know what to call it, has been really odd. I find it really strange.
Yeah.
They say that merchants can accept it via PayPal. Are they actually receiving Bitcoin, or is it just like in their ecosystem?
I feel like it's just, I feel like it's like if somebody sees something and they say they accept Bitcoin, you pay with it, but it's converted to dollars instantly,
Mhm.
or, something along those lines. Either way, you can't control your private keys. So PayPal was dead to me as soon as they said that,
Yeah.
so as far as the Bitcoin aspect. If you can't control your keys, you don't own Bitcoin, you have a Bitcoin IOU. And we've seen how that's worked out with fractional reserve and with other financial practices. So if you don't own the keys, you don't own Bitcoin.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how companies' decisions to practice like that impacts them, and if it's going to backfire, if companies like Square are going to have a lot more success. And yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of people that have bought Bitcoin on, or other cryptocurrencies on, Robinhood, which is like the same exact idea of just the IOU. And there's oftentimes they're like no coiners that are kind of surprised when I tell them that it's not real, that they don't understand.
They'll tell you, "I bought Bitcoin." And you're like, "No, you didn't."
Yeah. I mean, it's something I've been trying to tell people over and over again, is if it's in the bank, it's not yours. And we've seen that so many times in history. I mean, capital controls are really scary. They're really, really scary.
Absolutely. I mean, if you remember when COVID first started, that time period where you, banks were closed and you couldn't get but a certain amount out of ATMs, and that like decreased even more. Then you had to now I think you have to set up appointments just to go inside to take out a certain amount of money. So it's already happening. I think that was just a catalyst, and um, I'm not surprised. We've seen this ATM shut down. We've seen I mean, they had a flash mess up with Bank of America where everybody's account read zero when they woke up. So, I mean, these things to me are not mistakes. I'll just say I've been on this earth long enough to know that coincidences are very far and few between, and this is sort of coordinated at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think COVID's been kind of an convenient excuse for a lot of these different companies to really accelerate plans that they already had. Yeah. And it's been pretty apparent that they want to get rid of cash. And that's the thing that's so crazy about all of this, is because I feel like in the talks about CBDCs, and for anybody that's listening that doesn't know what we're talking about central bank digital currencies, which are kind of like the central bank's stable coins version of the dollar, but or whatever the local currency is. But unless people can self-custody and there's like a distributed ledger that can't be fudged, the system's like the exact same as it is, and we're just giving more and more control to these institutions. So like, you know, if you're concerned about social justice, like, so in the past, like you look at what happened with MLK or Malcolm X, or, you know, any of these leaders that were like targeted by the FBI, harassed by law enforcement, beat up. What they can do in the current system is just completely take any, they can just take the wind out of the sails, like, of an organization that they don't like, or a person that they don't like, by just like shutting down their bank accounts, or with the digital currency, they can just like confiscate it, where, you know, with cash, you can't do that. So that at least, like, you know, with civil rights people in the past had a little bit more power and control. And that's, I mean, one of the things you said, so there's this attitude that people have, where there's kind of like a bystander effect when there's a community that's different from them, where they, you know, will stand by and watch bad things happen to them. And one of the things that you said, and I think the interview with Peter McCormick, was that if they're not coming for your community yet, you're next. So this is something that we all need to be concerned about. And I think, unfortunately, like, that's an attitude that we like aren't concerned for our neighbors, you know, to the extent that we need to be. And we have these dividing lines that just aren't real or like meaningful, just because people are different than us. And it's really, really dangerous. So do you,
Absolutely.
so how do you see the next couple of years looking for our country?
So depends on the presidential race, because right now we don't know. But for the next few years of our country, I feel like we're in the bread and circuses era of the Roman Empire, where we're basically, everybody has an iPhone, everybody has, you know, all of this, you know, material stuff, makes them feel good, keeps them busy, keeps them occupied. Everybody's watching Netflix and Hulu. Nobody's really paying attention to things. I think there is some sort of awakening coming. I don't know if it will be something catastrophic. It won't. I don't think it'll be zombie land and all that. What I think it will be a shock to the system that will sort of wake people up out of the slumber, which has started already. I think the COVID, and then the fact that all these people lost jobs, and then the fact that they're giving out stimulus checks, and then they're like, well, no stimulus check. Now what are you going to do? People are like, hold up, something's got to change here. So I think that moment is getting closer and closer. So in the next few years, I feel like the U.S. will either change drastically to where we have some sort of tech-based or maybe even Bitcoin-based politician leading, where we are focused on that, or the U.S. will not be as strong as before, and you'll see a lot of exits from companies that are Bitcoin and crypto-based because they have the money to do it, and U.S. regulation kills us. So if I had to make a prediction, I think, in a few years, we'll see a drastic change. I don't know exactly how it will happen, but a drastic change economically as well as socially in this country, because 2020 has shown is pretty close and is well needed.
Yeah, it's just a big house of cards. So
Yeah.
if the U.S. Has some pretty hostile regulations against Bitcoin, do you see yourself moving out of the country?
I've thought about it. However, I do like the strides that have been taken in places like Wyoming, where you have Caitlin Long pushing with
Yeah.
a lot of the legislation, as well as Loomis, I believe her last name, was just elected House of Reps. She's had Bitcoin since 2013. We have people like that on our side now, where they're hardened politicians, but they believe that Bitcoin is the future. So if I had to, quote unquote, leave, I think Wyoming's a good spot. I have thought about leaving the country. I write about that in the new book, where as Black Americans, a lot of times something revolutionary pushes you to a point where you can't stay here. And if it happens, then here are some examples of where you could go where Bitcoin is still prominent. So that has crossed my mind. But I've been thinking about that even before Bitcoin, just because I'm a history buff. I love history, and just seeing the pattern of where we're going, it's like, geez, we're literally following the script of how the Roman Empire fell, and how the Mongolian Empire, how all these empires have failed, and we're the youngest of these empires to that point. You know what I mean? So it's like, Jesus Christ, we're getting to this point where it's unbearable. So yeah, I've thought about it.
What countries have you looked at?
The biggest ones I've looked at, or the biggest, most likely to go to, Belize. I've looked
Yeah.
at I've looked at in South Africa. Just got a few friends there, so that would be pretty good. Looked at different African nations like Kenya, which is going crazy with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Also Ghana is up there. So those would probably be my top ones. But yeah, Belize and Dominican Republic. Have some friends down there as well who like that community as well.
Yeah, I mean, Africa, I need to get over there. It's just such a beautiful continent, and it's so diverse and huge and awesome.
Absolutely.
And has so much potential too. I mean, I think if they are able to, I mean, just that, I could see them, that continent being like the new Europe, where it gains dominance over the world and is a major shift. And it would be kind of refreshing to see that, because it's just a region that's just been devastated by imperialism. And yeah, I mean, it's just like, you look at countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo and what's happened there and what's continuing to happen there. Like, there's just, yeah, there's so much wealth that could be created. And I'd love to see that happen. Yeah, Belize. Yeah, John McAfee. He was in Belize for a little bit.
Good old McAfee.
Anytime I hear about Belize, I think of him down there doing all of his crazy stuff. You could start your own.
All the stuff in the documentary.
Yeah, that documentary is insane. Yeah, I was really excited to see him eat his manhood on TV, but apparently that's not going to happen.
Not gonna happen. Yeah, we interviewed him on our show. We talked to him about it, man. We kind of got the idea. He wasn't really going to go through with it, but it was funny when he said it.
Yeah. What was his prediction? It was like $1 million by
$1 million by 2020.
Yeah.
Or by the end of 20. What did you say? 2021. Something like that.
Yeah, it might have been like the beginning of 2021.
Yeah. So I mean, won't see it, but at the same time, I wasn't really expecting it. I just thought it was funny when he said it.
Yeah. I mean, that's great. He's one of the. So yeah, okay. So there's been like a lot of different characters in Bitcoin that have had their rise and fall. that's one of the things that's really interesting about it is like Bitcoin is kind of on a trajectory and people can have opinions about it. Um, what do you see for like the future of Bitcoin as a technology in and of itself?
So I see Bitcoin becoming the gold standard as far as storage of value. And as the community grows, I think we'll get a sort of a civil war. And some people may be surprised that I'm saying that, but what I've already started to see it is that when the price of Bitcoin goes ballistic, you have people that have already been here, and then you have a lot of institutional people that show up like, hey, I'm a veteran. I'm very proficient in this field, and I just want to transfer it over to Bitcoin. And Bitcoin people are like, no, banker, or sorry, institutional finance guy, stay over there. You know what I mean? So I think that civil war is coming, but I think it's good because we need a marketplace of ideas as well as sort of that clash to go ahead and get it out the way, and then establish what I believe is going to be a global financial economy based on Bitcoin. So I think that's what we'll see coming up. We already sort of have infighting, like when people get bored in the Bitcoin community, they go back and forth. But it's great. At the end of it, everybody gets their ideas out and nobody dies. It's way better than war. And I think that's the difference in how Bitcoin community operates versus the current financial system. If people have money problems, they go in. I mean, reading the book, the Economic Hitman, seeing how they go into countries that they want to debase their value, they can do it at any moment. And with Bitcoin, you can't just take away somebody's value just because you don't like them. So I think that's where we're headed, where we'll have that fighting, but because the value is still there, it'll actually help long term.
So are you predicting another hard fork?
I would say there will be an attempt in the next 5 to 10 years. Somebody will try to do some sort of hard fork with a better Bitcoin. But that's only going to become as a result of Bitcoin's price going crazy, I think. Bitcoin, let's say it goes to 6 figures in the next 3 years. There's going to be people like, all right, it's too much money to be made with this. I'm going to fork off and try and market it as the new whatever. And we see Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin SV still have value somehow. So it's not as if it's not as if somebody wouldn't make money off of it. It would only take maybe one seasoned Bitcoin veteran to just kind of step out and say, well, I'm gonna make the real Bitcoin and have a few little followers and maybe get a few million in liquidity. So I think we may see that, but as far as Bitcoin itself, Bitcoin is Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the really powerful things about it is it's something that's determined entirely by the free market, and that's kind of what the result of the last major hard fork debacle with like Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin SV is that BTC was and is the winner. I mean, some people might disagree, but it's pretty apparent.
Yeah. Calvin Air might have something to say about that. But,
yeah. Yeah. It's I mean, the politics for like somebody coming into Bitcoin for the first time, it's probably a good idea, especially on Twitter, to keep your head down a little bit and just like observe, because there are some pretty strong feelings.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, this has been a fun interview. What are you most excited about in the future? I know you just had a kid, so congratulations.
Thank you. Yep. Very excited about having a Bitcoin baby. And that's really what I'm looking forward to in the future. Just the next generation, because I think I've hit a point in my Bitcoin, I guess, career, you could call it, or whatever, where I've realized that talking to adults, talking to people my age and older, it only goes so far. If they don't know about it, in my opinion, there's enough information to find out at this point. We have plenty of YouTubes, plenty of podcasts, plenty of information out there. I'm pivoting towards the kids, and not only because I have a daughter, I'm pivoting towards having a Bitcoin summer camp, having Bitcoin classes at colleges and high schools, because I want to create the next army of Bitcoin and blockchain professionals and crypto people early. Because in my opinion, every industry, like let's say when the tech boom happened in the late 90s, there was some 10-year-old kid in 94 who's eating everybody's lunch right now. And his name's Zuckerberg. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I mean. You know what I mean? So right now, I want to meet that kid now, because 10 years from now, when this is the standard, I want to either educate or get them to the point where we can have sort of that streamline of getting them there. So that's more of where my focus is for the future, on the kids. And I'm on the board for a company, Innovative Learning, a 501c3 nonprofit, which literally is after school and summer camp for kids. And that's the next goal, is to get Bitcoin to as many people as possible, mostly kids.
That's awesome. So is the innovative learning, is that like an in-person teaching, or are you guys doing online stuff now too?
Yep, it started as in person when it was first formed. Of course, COVID changed that, so now we've transitioned to remote learning, which is great, simply because you can reach more children with it. The Bitcoin Summer Camp I planned was in person, but now that it's remote, we can reach kids all around the country, because there's not many summer camps that offer that. So yes, Innovative Learning is online and digital, remote.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's pretty interesting, like the disconnect with the older generations around the idea of Bitcoin. I think
Mhm.
I think it's kind of one of these situations where there's a bunch of people stuck thinking that the Earth is flat, hearing that it's not, and um, I just think that that's the. So, like, from an economic standpoint, would you consider yourself of the Austrian persuasion, or where do you stand?
Yeah, I would say I'm more of the Austrian persuasion. And a lot of the economic theories that have come forth, I think Bitcoin has pieces of them, but it's its own theory in itself, simply because it pulls from so many different facets. You got physics, you got history, you got network effect, you got the Lindy effect. I mean, it's so many things it pulls from. So it's sort of its own economic theory, but mostly Austrian. Yeah.
Yeah, we might have to coin a new term to describe it if there isn't one already. Bitcoin
Yeah, I mean,
economics.
yeah, I was gonna say Bitcoin economics. As it grows, there'll be more to it, because I don't think we have every financial product that's available on Bitcoin that can be available. I mean, we're still working on it. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you start seeing that in college courses in the next decade. Bitcoin
Yeah.
economics. How does a open source system work with scarcity?
Yeah. Well, I was actually invited to speak at a college in Loyola on
Mm,
Bitcoin economics, and it was really interesting. Um,
nice.
yeah, I was kind of surprised at like how engaged and knowledgeable the students were on Bitcoin, because most of the people I run into have no clue what I'm talking about. I don't know if that's just specific to Tucson because we're the last to do anything cool with technology. But it drives me insane.
No,
I've been like,
I think that might be nationwide, brother, because that's why I pivoted towards college kids and high school students. Because if you're under the age of 11, you've never lived in a world without Bitcoin. So most of these college kids are like 18, 19. They were kids when Bitcoin boomed and may have first heard it, but they grew up in a video game era where you had tokens, you had digital money, everything is on the phone anyway. So if you say there's money you could spend with your phone, they're not, oh, hold up. So now it's something else I got to learn. That's what most older people do. They're like, oh, I got to learn something else on the phone. Most younger people can pick it up like that. So that's why I'm pivoting that way, because they get it a lot easier and they accept it because they see what's going on around them. It's not as if we have some sort of great economy to share with them now. They're like, oh, yeah, it's the difference in what we have now. Perfect. I'll try that. So you're right. I think, because I've had some talks with college students, they're really on point. They get it. And that's sort of all you really need to understand Bitcoin long term.
yeah. Yeah, I think the next wave of influencers are going to be on TikTok. I mean, it was pretty wild watching the Dogecoin pump and dump recently. That was led by TikTok,
Yeah.
like just the amount of energy and power. And what's crazy about like social media platforms like that, I mean, you use Facebook as an example, is how quickly they can come up and just like dominate a market. And then also like you look at a lot of these companies like Blockbuster, how quickly they can like die and leave the market.
Mhm.
It's really hard to predict the future because things are just moving so quickly. I don't think any of us could have predicted what's happened with Bitcoin in 2020 with like MicroStrategy dumping millions into it. And yeah,
Mhm.
have you had the chance to talk to Michael Saylor yet on your
I have
podcast?
not. I have had an invite from someone for a roundtable where Sailor may be a part of it, but I have not spoken to him myself. Would love to in the near future, hopefully. But yeah, his move. That's why I hate when people say they're Bitcoin experts or industry experts, because I'm like, nobody predicted that shit. Don't
Yeah.
even don't even try to play like And a lot of what happens is new. It's brand new. So even if you know what you're talking about, how the market will move and moves like that, can't predict it, because who knows who will come out next. If Bezos will come out and say, yeah, by the way, we've accumulated half a trillion dollars worth, whatever. So yeah, you're right. I think that moves the needle a lot with people like Michael Saylor.
Yeah.
Probably the biggest news story of the year.
Yeah. I mean, that's going to be one for the history books. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Twitter's been just relentless and harassing people that try and come up with these models of when to buy and sell. And it's been entertaining, but I would hate to be on the receiving end of that. I would just lose my mind. So,
Oh yeah. I saw that coming a long time ago. When I first was on Twitter, maybe 2014, 15, I used to put out graphs like stuff I was trading, things I was looking at. I maybe did that 3 months, and I was like, "Nah, I'm done." Only because not because I was getting killed. I was doing fine. It was just I would see how other people would get in. Oh, you gave a wrong call, and I lost money, and you suck, and blah blah blah. And they would get a following, and then that whole person's account would be gone. I was like, well, Bitcoin's more than that. So let me not focus in on that, because you're right. Some people are relentless. You lose some people money, and there are some famous accounts that have lost people a lot of money with trading.
yeah, trading is super dangerous. And one of the craziest things that has happened in 2020 is the options market has grown larger than the spot market for stocks, which is just terrifying. I mean,
that's insane.
Yeah. So like if somebody's brand new to Bitcoin, they get a Coinbase account, which I wouldn't suggest doing. There's lots of better places to go, but they get a Coinbase account and they're looking at like the 20 or 30 different cryptocurrencies that are on there. Bitcoin's trading around 15,000 today. And then X coin is at like 5 cents. What would you suggest for people to do in that type of situation?
I would say, for one, if you've never invested in cryptocurrency, always start with Bitcoin, and then work your way up from there. Because to me, that is the reserve asset. That's the granddaddy, the store of value. That's where everything basically will get their value from. And then other coins take more time to research the theme, maybe see a market cycle before you invest. Because some people think, well, it's 5 cents, so I can buy more of it. And I always tell them, it's like, technically, yes, you could, maybe. But the amount of money lost on the drawdowns on a lot of these coins after their pump has left a lot of people penniless and, basically out of the crypto market for good. I think Ripple was probably the biggest catalyst of that in 2016, 17. I remember half of my conversations were trying to convince people Bitcoin's better than Ripple, if you can believe that. People were like, no, well, Ripple's 12 cents. It's 15 cents. I could make blah, blah, blah. And like I said, technically they could have. When it went to $3, they were able to sell it, fine. The problem is the small things that people like you and I know is, could they access an exchange when this pump happened? Probably no. Could they sell a certain amount at that point? Probably no. Could they even withdraw the amount that they made if they traded? Probably no. The rise up and draw down was so quick. A lot of people can't catch that. And if you're not an experienced trader, if you fall asleep for 6 hours, you might wake up and all your money's gone. And that happened to a lot of people. So with Bitcoin, what I tell people is dollar cost averaging over time, if you're not a trader, is the best strategy. And saving as a store of value is the best way for 95% of people to go. Not many people are going to make money trading. So don't stress yourself, and you can basically use it as a store of value long term.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good advice. It's important for people to do their own research, and I think with how crazy of a paradigm shift Bitcoin is, part of the research would probably be putting like a very small amount of money in and playing around with it, sending it
Yep.
from place to place. But yeah, I mean, even like I had a guy asking me about Ethereum today, and I advised him against it for multiple reasons. But there's so much bad marketing in the investment world in general. I mean, people like to talk bad on cryptocurrency specifically, but you know, the traditional finance world is just as crazy and just full of Ponzi-nomics of people. Like Pierre Rochard was on the show, and one of the things he said that was really interesting was the idea that normal people have no business owning stock in all these big companies, and they instead should invest in themselves and invest in their own businesses, and that's one of the things that Bitcoin allows you to do is it's money, whereas I don't consider Ethereum money. It's like a speculative investment.
If you want to gamble, fine. That's what I tell people. I mean, it's fine, but I always remind people that every coin that you invest in outside of Bitcoin has a central team, a central designer, and at any point they could be shut down. Vitalik tomorrow could get some sort of, I don't know, SEC injunction, and they could say Ethereum, something could happen. Even the way that it works, Ethereum transactions could get stuck with super high fees. Too much bad can go wrong. Whereas Bitcoin, you are self-sovereign, and there is no central person to go after. So it's still king to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like, a lot of people don't understand the importance of decentralization. And that's a good spot to learn about too, is the importance of decentralization. The more you learn about Bitcoin, the more you'll learn about money, the history of money, and like the differences between Bitcoin and traditional money. Yeah, I mean, in your book, you do a good job of outlining what Bitcoin is. So that's definitely a good place to start. You break it down in a way that's not super technical, and is pretty palatable to the average person getting into it. So you have your new book open for pre-order right now. Where's the best places to like access the stuff that you're doing?
The best place to access it is three places: bitcoinandblackamerica.com for books, the first and second edition, and merch coming soon. The audio version and the digital version coming soon as well on the website. You can also find me on Twitter. Twitter is the best place to contact me if you want to chat, or if you want to maybe talk about something in the industry. Twitter at BitcoinZay. And lastly, on YouTube, The Gentleman of Crypto, daily at 1 p.m. Eastern. We do news and updates. We're at episode 604. We've been around since 2017. Been through bear and bull market. So trust me, we have some great followers there who have been there through it all. So those are the three best ways to find me and contact me.
Yeah, you guys got some strong hands.
Oh yeah. We've seen a lot since 2013. So once we started the show, it was just kind of overflow from there.
Can you buy the book with Bitcoin?
Yes. The plugin is actually being worked on right now, but by November 11th, when the book ships, yes, you'll be able to buy with Bitcoin. Just like the first edition, you were able to buy with Bitcoin as well.
Awesome.
And merchandise, everything will be on there through BTC Pay server. Shout out to them.
I'm really, yes. BTC Pay server is where it's at. Way better than the other stuff. Yeah, I'm excited to read your new book, and really appreciate you coming on and having this conversation.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me on, man. Definitely a great conversation.
Thanks. That was a really fun conversation. I felt like I learned a lot. It's so much fun to have these conversations and just to be able to ask questions and learn from people that have different experiences, and really appreciate Isaiah's time coming on, because I think he has a really good perspective on things that is unique and different from a lot of what's being talked about in the mainstream. And, you know, one of the things I found really hopeful was that he gave real concrete ways that we can better our community. And those are always things that I am searching for, because there's always going to be issues in our society, and a lot of times there are issues that we can address and solve as a community. And using Bitcoin is a way to empower people in a way that hasn't been possible before it. So yeah, he just did a great job of explaining it. And if you're not sold on his book yet, I don't know what you're doing. I mean, it's a really good book. It's definitely a must read. And I really look forward to his second edition. And yeah, I mean, I was just really grateful to have like a nuanced conversation about the issue of race, because there's so much tension around it, and yet it's such an important conversation. And I think it's one, like, as in being white, that is important not to shy away from, you know. And hopefully I didn't say anything ignorant or hurtful, because that's not my intent. You know, my intent is to learn and to be helpful, and to really like address the issues in our society that are really hurting people, which it just sucks. But yeah, if you like what I'm doing with the podcast, would love for you to support me on Patreon. You could support me for as little as $1 a month. I mean, ultimately what I want to do is just create a community. I want to see people adopt Bitcoin. I want to see people's lives change as they learn about money and get their finances together. We just have so many issues. Our monetary system is broken, and it looks like people living paycheck to paycheck. And you know, the incentive structure is built that way. You know, they want you spending all your money. They don't want you saving. And the way they convince people to do that, whether they know it or not, is just by constantly devaluing their money. And so if you're not making your money work for you, you're getting poorer and poorer. And yeah, I'm not trying to give anybody financial advice, and just trying to educate people on what money is and, you know, what potential options are. But yeah, your support really goes a long way to helping me continue to do this podcast. Some of the best ways to support like you is just join the community. You know, shoot me a message on Twitter at the Tucson Bitcoin Podcast. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that stuff. Leave a review if you're listening to the audio. It is really, really helpful. And yeah, I'm happy to answer questions. We're in a bull market, so a lot of new people are going to be flooding in the space who don't know anything. And like, please do your research and don't get scammed. It just sucks when people get scammed and then they have a bad taste in their mouth. Don't want people losing money on bad investments, and making uneducated decisions. Thanks for stopping by.